The history of the Vancouver Canucks is filled with what-if questions. Despite coming close in 1982, 1994, and 2011, the hockey club is entering its 54th season, never having won the Stanley Cup. Now, a new book looks at the sometimes thrilling, often infuriating, and always fascinating story of the team. A, quote, litany of woe that stretches back farther and runs deeper than many Canucks fans realize. Here to talk about Never Boring, the up and down history of the Vancouver Canucks, is author and longtime sports writer Ed Willis. You call your book a messy, beautiful love story. What is it about this team, despite its record of futility, that keeps fans coming back year after year?
Well, I think the short answer is it's ours. It is the one thing in the world of sports that is uniquely British Columbian. You know, I always maintain there's a force field at the Rocky Mountains and things never came in and things never get out. And I don't think the larger NHL world truly appreciates everything the Canucks have been over the years. So I just think the story needed to be told in its totality.
Now, you start the book likening the Canucks to the Boston Red Sox, who famously went 86 years, I think it was, between championships, and how success kind of changed them. Do you think success would change the Vancouver Canucks?
Like to find out, wouldn't you? It just that parallel always stuck with me because I was such a Red Sox fan, and things did change after 2004. But those fans thought their team was cursed, thought they were forever doomed to always come close but not quite get there. And I think Canucks fans can relate to that part, at least. I don't know how long the metaphor stretches because the Red Sox have won 3 World Series since I think maybe even 4 since 2004, and we're still waiting for our first one. But I think prior to that, the pre-2004 world, I think there's a real parallel there.
Now, as mentioned, the history of the Canucks is filled with what-if questions, and you start the book off with a doozy, perhaps one few fans knew about. I didn't know about this. In a chapter titled, "What if Stafford Smythe hadn't been a vindictive jerk?" Who is Stafford Smythe, and what role does he play in the club's history?
Yeah, I didn't know about it either, and I just stumbled upon this doing the research. So Stafford Smythe, I think his official title is chairman of the board, but he and Harold Ballard are co-owners of the Toronto Maple Leafs, which makes them one of the 2 or 3 most powerful people in the NHL. So in 1964, he tells Jim Kearney at the Vancouver Sun he's willing to build a brand new arena for this new NHL team, which is doubtlessly going to come to Vancouver in 1967. And the proviso is the city has to donate the land. And of course, the land he picks is where the Vancouver Public Library now sits. So it goes, it becomes this hugely divisive public issue. It goes to a plebiscite. I think it's the 1965 mayoral election. It's soundly defeated, and Stafford Smythe says, that's it. There will never be NHL hockey in Vancouver for a generation. It's a Bush League town. Well, that generation lasted 3 years, but it also set in motion these forces that seem to have haunted the Vancouver Canucks since their birth. This wonky ownership, the wrong people being in the positions of power at the wrong time. They never did get the franchise in 1967, although they were considered to be a slam dunk. By Clarence Campbell, who was president of the NHL at the time. The ownership turned into a mess. It continued until 1970, and the Vancouver Canucks' first owner was a dude from Minnesota named Tom Scallon. Local ownership never stepped up until the Griffiths bought them in 1978.
Now, that leads me to my next question, actually. One of the recurring themes you touch on in the book is the tumultuous ownership the team has had over the years. As you put it, dysfunction in the big office will find its way onto the ice. We don't have to go through 54 years of ownership changes, Ed, but instead I'll ask you best and worst. Who was the best ownership? What was the best ownership era of the team?
I think it was the Griffiths era, but it was also a time when, like, the local rich guy could own a team. He didn't have to spell his money with a B, like a millionaire, a guy who owned a couple of radio stations, like Griffiths did, could fund an NHL team. Much more stable. There was a bit of a family atmosphere. And when he hired Pat Quinn, he hired the right guy to run the show too. So in terms of stability, there was a period there, I'm going to say from about 1990 until 1990. Well, it would probably be 94, and then the next season too, when Arthur still has control of the team. Then he has to sell to the McCaws, to John McCaw, and then all hell breaks loose.
And that brings me to the worst ownership group. Would you say it's the McCaw Orca Bay era?
Yeah, I think so. Aquilinis are a close second. The Aquilinis have had a couple of like highlights, which you have to factor into the equation. But I just think like McCaw was never interested in owning an NHL franchise in Vancouver. He just kind of got into this financial position where he had to keep throwing money at the Canucks and then the Grizzlies too. But when you think of it, think of what that thing could have been worth. Think of what NBA franchises are worth now. The average NBA franchise is worth north of $3 billion. And we had this one that, Arthur bought for 125 million US back in the mid 90s. So it was all there, and with like the proper decision makers in place. And when you talk about John McCaw, you have to talk about his right-hand man, Stan McCammon, who's responsible for so many ruinous decisions in the life story of the Canucks. Yeah, I think McCaw wins worst ownership, which is really a dubious honor.
Now, getting back to the great what-if questions in Canucks history, one of the biggest ones, or perhaps the great one, if you will, has to be the time that Wayne Gretzky came this close to putting on a Vancouver sweater. What happened there?
It's a remarkable story, and I was sort of aware of the broad strokes of it, but in talking to the people involved, I got a much clearer picture. Wayne was signed, sealed, and delivered. He wanted to come to Vancouver. He'd gotten to the point where he was looking at homes in West Van, and his wife Janet was talking to the other Canucks wives about schools. He liked Pat Quinn. He was close with Trevor Lynn, and everything was lined up. So he goes to meet with McCaw and McCammon in Seattle with his agent, Mike Barnett. They sit down, they hammer out an agreement, and this is going late in the morning, about 11 o'clock. Wayne says, "That's it, I'm going to bed. You guys finish it," because there was a framework of a deal in place. They finally, I think, get to the final numbers about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And Barnett says to McCammon, "Okay, that's fine. I'll give this to Wayne in the morning. We'll sign off, and Wayne will be a Canuck." That isn't good enough for McCammon, who is convinced they're going to take this offer and shop it around to the rest of the NHL. And there is a rumor going around that the Rangers have the first right of refusal. Never been substantiated, but that's in the air. Barnett says, "No, I'm not going to wake my client up at 2 a.m. to, present this to him." McCammon insists on it. Barnett phones Wayne, who is really unimpressed by this turn of events. He says, "No, I'm going to talk it over with Janet, and we'll do it in the morning." McCammon pulls the offer off the table. I think within 2 days, Wayne signs with the Rangers. But there is no doubt he would have come to the Canucks cheerfully. And then again, you have to think in terms of the events that set in motion. With Wayne, there's no Mark Messier. With no Mark Messier, there's no Mike Keenan. Wayne was still a very he wasn't the Wayne of the mid '80s, but he was still a very productive player. And I covered him with the Rangers for 2 years, and he got that Rangers team his first year there to the conference finals. So again, it was so many what ifs with the Canucks, but that was a beauty. And again, I almost had to rediscover the story.
Now, the book ends on a hopeful note, almost by accident. The incredible playoff run following the 2023-24 season, Vancouver's first real playoff run in almost a decade. The Canucks opened their 2024-25 campaign October the 9th. What are you most looking forward to this season?
To see if last season was a mirage, if it was like a team that overachieved, that caught a lot of team by surprise, or if they really are a legitimate NHL power. I mean, the remarkable thing about that time, yes, they made noise in the playoffs, but I mean, they're in first place in the NHL till well into the second half of the season. So I am just really curious to see if they are the real thing, if the goaltending can hold up over this stretch of a season. I think that's the big question, is that, the health of Thatcher Demko. I think the other big one is Elias Pettersson, a legitimate superstar. Is he a number one guy, a guy who can carry a team, or is he just a very good player? And I think that all will out here over the next season.
54 years is a long time to wait for a cup, isn't it?
Oh, it is, but it hasn't been boring.
Never boring. What do you hope people take away from the book?
I think maybe just an appreciation of everything, you know, like as a writer, you know, you think of the elements you're looking for in a story, you know, and that's drama, it's twists and turns, it's plot twists, it's flawed heroes, it's polarizing, and the Canucks have had all of those things in spade. So I think the story itself is absolutely fascinating, even if they haven't never got the ending quite right. But I don't think that detracts from the story or the interest the story generates.
And what a story it is. The name of the book is Never Boring, The Up and Down History of the Vancouver Canucks. It's available from Harbor Publishing. My thanks to author Ed Willis.
Thank you, John. Have a good day now.